Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Espresso with Matt. I'm really thrilled to have a great guest lined up for today. We're talking about a lot of great things. Vidya, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you today?
I am doing well. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Matt, for having me. It's so exciting to be here.
I'm really excited. So, you are a keynote speaker, an executive coach, an author. You wear many different hats, have a great, diverse background and experiences. Can't wait to get into a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. But our first question we always start every episode with is what's in the cup today? What are we drinking today for coffee?
Well, I have to confess, I have something really boring. It's water, and
Oh, okay.
but it's water in a Toastmasters cup. And my whole journey into speaking and communication, any human skill kind of started with my journey with Toastmasters. So I guess I owed them this, and I knew you were going to ask me the question. And the only reason I don't have coffee is because I'm already wound up. And if I had my third cup of coffee today with you, you probably don't want me on this chair.
Absolutely. We want a healthy balance of caffeine and hydration here, and all beverages are welcome on Espresso Matt. And what a fun organization Toastmasters is. And it's something I've always thought about myself looking into because, I had a CEO a few years ago. I was talking about career development. He's like, Matt, join Toastmasters. You'll learn how to speak, you'll have fun, you'll enjoy it. So wonderful plug to them and great mug. They give you your mug your first meeting, or how do you earn the mug?
Oh
How
no,
you get?
actually, I was gifted this cup when I reached a certain education level within Toastmasters. I can't quite tell what that level was. It was in the old Distinguished Toastmasters program, so it was something I received, a commendation like, "Oh, you achieved this level." So I've treasured this. Frankly, I even have a champagne flute with
Oh wow.
Toastmasters on it.
Well, we make a show called Champagne with Matt. We'll bring that out, but for today we're going to stick with espresso. So I have my usual Cafe Bustelo double espresso. And it's my second cup today, and like you, I kind of caffeinate pretty early in the day, and I kind of wind down throughout the day. But really excited. So you have such a great background, and I'm thrilled you're joining the show today. I heard you speak a few months ago at a SHRM event, and I was just so impressed with your conversation, what you talked about. I said, I really want to connect with you, and we've had some great conversations leading up to this episode. But just for everyone out there, give a bit of a background of what you do, kind of your work history, and a little bit of your journey to where you are today, if you will.
Sure, I know. Just like you said in the introduction, I am a motivational speaker. I conduct workshops. I'm an executive coach. I do career coaching. And I also published a book. And the book's title tells you everything about my background. The book's title is Lucky You, An Insider's Guide to Achieving Success and Finding Fulfillment. I was on the other end of the spectrum. I was what I call the long suffering employee, the employee who felt invisible no matter what I did. I just felt nobody noticed me. I could give an answer in a meeting, somebody else would get the credit because I somehow, maybe I wasn't an effective communicator. But what was said and done, I missed promotion after promotion after promotion. And then I realized there's something wrong here. I got to do some soul searching. And that's when I turned to self help books and listen to videos. And those days I used to play CDs on my commute to work. And, there's a lot of people who helped me. I listened to a lot, got a lot of great advice. And then it clicked. I mean, I can't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results, the definition of insanity. So that's when I started my own growth journey, which honestly is the very first step of everybody's growth journey, self awareness. So it's all about emotional intelligence. So that's where I was. And my transformational story, my building of confidence, my growth in the corporate ladder all came because I was deep in despair. And my book is all about how do you get out of that. So that's the book. And now I use it for all my talks, my presentations, human skills that help you get ahead, that help you shift your mindset, in short.
Well, I've seen a lot of your content, a lot of your speaking engagements, and I've heard your story spoken in several trainings. And what an amazing story about that self-awareness piece of it, which is really, really important. also want to go back to that word despair. And, it's interesting over the last year, I've really done a lot of networking and connecting and talking to a lot of leaders who are in successful positions, you know, but have this sense of lack of fulfillment, lack of achievement, not sure where they're going. Um, you know, and it really comes down to like that idea of like really not being aware of what they really want and values they really want. And so you talked about this kind of journey you go on. You got the self-help books, the CDs, those type of things, and what was kind of prompting that? Like, what was really kind of getting you to the point where saying, I have a lot here, but I'm just not happy. Like, what was that? What was driving that for you?
I don't know how many of you have thought deeply about this. This is pain. We all know inside our heads that we have so much to offer this world. And I was exactly there. I felt like, oh my God, why doesn't anybody know what I have inside me? I have so much potential. And I tell you one thing, for people who feel terrible and in that valley of despair, it's that pain of unexpressed potential. So you are competent, you are amazing at something, but nobody else seems to know the secret. And that pain is where people just say, I give up. I don't know what more I can do. And in a way, because you're not getting traction, you kind of give up. And that's where you have this feeling of being directionless, right? And when you get to that point where you feel lost or stuck, that's the time not to do more, but completely retreat, pull back, say, you know what, I'm checking out for a while. I need to go inside because there's nothing outside. The outside has pretty much been moving around me and leaving me behind. So I say, retreat for reflection, pause your life, and come back and say, what do I want, right? So when I hit that point, I had to take up journaling. So I wrote a lot about who I am, what are my strengths, what do I love, but who am I in my soul level? I used to take long walks, even speak to the universe and say, please guide me, guide me, tell me where I ought to be, these kind of conversations. But I tell you, sometimes quiet reflection really reveals a lot. So just separate yourself because somebody else's model of success shouldn't be yours, right? It should be genuinely, authentically yours. And that's why you need quiet. So that's where I tell people, if you feel, I don't know where I'm going next or what I should be doing, that's normal. That's normal. We all hit that point, that brick wall. But I would say slow down, reflect, read, educate yourself. Suddenly you'll be connecting dots. But we don't give ourselves that kind of time.
I am so glad I'm recording this. I have to take notes because I'm gonna go back and listen to that again because what a just full of great advice there. And then just want to talk a little bit about that for a second. As for my personal journey and other people's journeys, taking that moment to really sit down and think, what are my values? What am I good at? What do I want to do? And what I found with a lot of high achievers too, they don't do that work often sometimes. And in many ways, I found there's a struggle between you have this success and you see you're doing successful things, but talking about it, identifying it. For me, the way I used to think about it was I kind of like trying to grab sand. It kind of went slipped through my fingers a little bit. So I really sat down and said, what are my core values? What are my core strengths? What am I good at? What do I love doing? I should do more of that. And it led to my journey doing things like this when I started like a podcast, which is a completely different way of expressing myself. And what I think is really amazing right now is we have, without a doubt, some of the best technology in our human history, right? Between all the social media, technology, AI, all these things that we have, yet there's a big fear to use it to go from there. So I mean I embrace technology by saying, hey, I want to start a virtual coffee chat and talk to amazing people. So I love doing. I did it all my whole career. How do I kind of do that in a way that's authentic and feels right and with my values, with my what I can do? So your discussion about your journey is just so important and so important that discussion about how we kind of identify that. And for people right now who I think there's a lot of people out there kind of searching, right? Um, People have been laid off, huge job changes. I think the nature of work it's fundamentally changing a little bit for a lot of people. There's a lot of factors there. Even people who are very successful feel pretty unfulfilled. How do we kind of use that authentic communication, that style, to bring ourselves and maybe use different mediums, maybe different ways of communicating that out, trying new ways. How do you kind of embrace that challenge the new communication methods, let's put it that way.
Right. Listen, it's not easy, depending on, which generation you're in. Even 2.5 years ago, was it 3 years ago when I put out my first LinkedIn video? Let me tell you, it took me a long time to hit publish. I kept it there. I said, oh, people are going to think this is pretty idiotic, not so good. It took me so long to hit that final push button. And now I do it effortlessly, right? So there's always that barrier. And also, if you think about it, it doesn't come naturally to a certain generation. So I would say baby boomers, Gen Xers, we all less so than say Gen Zers. Like I am always amazed when I see the younger generation putting on makeup and speaking and giving tips and ideas. And I'm like, what do I focus on? They're giving some pearls of wisdom while applying makeup. I'm like, that's amazing. I couldn't do that. So it's really how you were raised. So if you were raised in, say, corporate America in the last 15, 20 years, you were taught to be professional. And in this professional world, you tend to have to be, well prepared. You have to have a certain presence. You can almost be boring, right? They groom you for that kind of perfection. And
Yeah.
in a way, the social media doesn't lend itself right for that. Because look at the Gen Zers who are making it, all these influencers. It's not that you should aspire to be an influencer, but what they do is authentic connection. So if somebody is looking to use this media that Gen Zers seem to be doing so well in, especially if you want to project your expertise, your authority, do it in a way that balance. It's like walking a tightrope between your professionalism, because you still want to be viewed as an authority, build your credibility, but at the same time, shave off, take away, pare down all that proper professionalism. And what I mean by that is try to connect. Try to connect, because remember, when you meet somebody in person, it's easier to build connection and rapport and trust. But over a media, a little bit more difficult, or it's not difficult, it's a different formula. So I would say when people are looking at your face, they're hearing your voice, they can also sense your intent. Like, what's your intent, right? Those are the things that create connection across medium. Like the way I speak on camera, in a way, kind of also reflects me meeting a friend in a coffee shop, right? So you got to think, I am not going to earn connection and respect and grow on digital media if I try to put this, oh, I'm a professor, I got to sound so proper. It's okay to make mistakes. You're a human being. So in a way, I would say relax, breathe. It's okay to be imperfect. Don't strive for perfection, and say, I can do this. I just have to sound like I care, right? See, people, if you sound like a textbook, you don't sound like you care.
Yeah.
But if you speak with insights and examples, you care. So that's what I use in my public speaking arena. I don't tell people who I am and give them my resume for credibility. I share insights of my life where people say, oh, she's been there and done that. I don't have to talk about what's my background. They just know it. So it's stories, it's connection, it's being real, but without being too shallow where people don't respect your expertise. So hopefully I answered that.
I will. We have a lot to unpack there. I will tell you, I wish I heard this from you a few years ago, because and you really has evolved because you think just in general how people connect and communicate. Um, I remember just the evolution of let's talk about social media, and it's funny to think about it, a world pre-social media. So I was watching a movie from the '90s the other day, which I liked the movie, and what stuck out to me was people would have to go to payphones to use the phone, right? And like it's like, wow, back in the olden days in the '90s where I grew up, didn't see that long ago. Communication has fundamentally changed. And this idea of especially being a leader, being an executive, I think we had this one view of that as being, knows everything, very polished, very in control. very buttoned up. You're on stage, and here's the thing that the performance has changed.
It
And
has.
so you're still on stage. Those are all true. People are still looking to you. But now we're talking about authentic communication. We're talking about connecting in different ways. And the first thing I want to go back to, I want to drill down a little bit more on this. You a few years ago sitting there ready to push send on that video. What an example. Because I will tell you this. I had absolutely that same fear, you know. And I just jumped into the pool deep end. I mean, if you asked me 3 years ago, Matt, you're gonna be doing a podcast, you're gonna be making 30 episodes and doing these long form interviews with people, I said, you're crazy. I would never do that. Who would put themselves out there that way? Um, so that first time you hit the send, all those voices you heard, I imagine this was true for you,
Yes.
didn't come from anywhere but your head. Is that correct? Or did people say to you, like, don't do this? What was the
Oh,
feedback from others?
it was all from my head.
Yeah.
The fear of judgment, the fear of people saying, "Oh my God, what is she trying? That sounds so stupid." And we're all perpetually embarrassed by our own voice. It's like weird things. Like I just had to say, it's we think more about other people thinking poorly of us than they really even think about us, right? You
Yes.
know, nobody's thinking about us, but we seem to have this big opinion of all this judgment. Nobody's paying attention. But that's exactly right. It was a voice from inside telling me, don't do it. You're going to regret it.
Yeah, and that really resonates with me. And someone told me self-esteem is not what I think about myself. It's not what you think about me. It's what I think you think about me. Which I had to kind of say that a few times to really get that. My
Yes.
wife, who's a social worker, says it very simple. She's like, Matt, you're not that important. Not everyone's thinking about you all the time. And but the truth is there that theme, right?
Yes.
That fear. And so I think especially for people jumping into this new media, whether it's putting content out, commenting on posts, doing a blog, doing a video, you know, find your authentic voice, find the right level, and again, I agree there's people out there who share everything. I no one want I don't want to share what I'm eating in the morning, and trust me, you don't want to see me before a shower. Um but I found the right balance, right? Of this, what it feels authentic to me. You found the right balance for what authentic you.
Yes.
I think that the point here, it certainly has evolved, and so much has evolved where I would imagine 15, 20 years ago, when you're talking to senior leaders, executives, almost no one was talking about, a visual social media brand or talking about, being authentic in their communication. It was all about that. That's all people are talking about. And so I think you got to change that. You have a lot of expertise. So that first thing about just jump in, it's okay. You know, it's such a great message. And I think the flip side of that message is do some thought there. You want to make sure you kind of have some thought there. But that's the first thing I wanted to come back to. The second thing I wanted to come back to was this idea of, you know, how did you kind of evolve there? Because, part of your journey was finding your voice,
Yes.
right? And you go back and you're finding your voice through corporate world. Now you're in front of hundreds of people speaking in conferences and events, and potentially the whole world on the social media platforms. What was that evolution like for you to find your voice, to find your authentic voice, to find the confidence to speak in that way, to put yourself out there and be vulnerable to that internal dialogue that says, no, they're all going to laugh at you. Like,
Yeah.
how did you go through that journey?
Listen, it's all very iterative. It's all reps. You got to do the reps. It has to be consistency. You got to have your direction. Once
Yeah.
you have your direction, the reason I joined Toastmasters is I felt my career was going nowhere. And I said, I have to invest in myself. So once I joined Toastmasters, I said, now that I've committed to Toastmasters, I've got to come here and speak more often. So I would write speeches. And honest to goodness, people don't realize this. It's not just how you speak that improves, it's how you write that improves because you're writing speeches. And little by little, getting all my little certifications along the way built my confidence. So the more you do, the more you excel, one small step at a time. Suddenly I'm like, then people come and give you feedback. That's when you know, ooh,
Yeah.
I am making an impact. So people would come and tell me things like, you should do more of this in your day job. When I heard that comment, I was a programmer and I'm like, I'm not really speaking for a living. But you see,
Yeah.
but I kept it in my mind. And then I took my next step and my next step. And when you get confident, guess what? You become more courageous, you take on more challenges. And as I pushed boundaries, I felt like I was really making it. And then I got into leadership. And then I realized I was mentoring people really well and they were excelling. And I said, wait a second, I'm doing something right. There has to be something here. And I could share this with the world. And that's when I realized, let me get out in the world and do what I'm doing really well right now in
Yeah.
corporate America. And that's how I got to speaking and tremendous confidence only because I stuck with it. And I'll even give you a time trajectory. 2011 is when I started Toastmasters, and 2022 is when I said I am done with my corporate chapter of my life and let me move on to public speaking, coaching, and all that. So you see, there's an evolution. It's not you
Yeah.
snap your fingers, but you got to push past your fears, all those voices. And I realized one thing: we overthink. Like you said, we talked. I want to get back to this very interesting quote. This played in my mind a lot. Frankly, it's not attributable to anybody. Some say Mark Twain, some say somebody else. But anyway, you will think a lot less about what people think of you when you realize how seldom they do. And we overthink our importance. So please shut that voice. Nobody's thinking. It's your journey, and you have to be invested in your journey, is my
Yeah.
message to you. Yeah.
Yeah. So important. And I want to say this, and I mean this is the deepest compliment I can give. I've met you over the last few months, had some conversations with you. The thought of you being a programmer to me, based on who you are today, is like I would never hire you for a programmer. There's a thousand things I would hire you for: coach, speaking, all these things. That evolution from being a programmer to where you are today. But you're fundamentally the same person. But that's such a great evolution, and so it's great that you mentioned that because I was like, wow, you know you're right. A programmer, I would not expect to write a book and to do public speaking. And maybe that's stereotypes. Maybe it's one of those things I should get past. But I mean that as the greatest compliment.
I get it.
That evolution. Getting back to that quote, I think that's even you know more true with social media and with the new forms of media, because the fact of the matter is, and one of the things I focus mostly on LinkedIn. And I find the community on LinkedIn's generally pretty supportive.
Yes.
Um, but there are still people out there that there is noise out there, and there are I think they refer to them as trolls and different things like that. And behind the keyboard, you can get social media. And it's tough because it's one of those things where if you have a new outfit and 10 people say, "Hey, I love your outfit," and then one person on the bus on the way home says, "What are you wearing? That's ugly." Who are you thinking about most? Most of us think about that one person. It's
That
just
one.
human nature.
Yes.
But I think if you get to that authentic communication, you feel a little bit more you feel more insulated against the critics.
Yes.
Um, it's not a straight line. So, what were some of the challenges once you started? You'll say, "Hey, I'm going to become a public speaker. I'm going to go through this." What are some of the challenges you went through, and how does that kind of online move to the online world? You know,
Oh, um, I mean, for public speaking, it was less of a bar because I had already been doing it. I've been speaking a lot. I had presented in other companies, all for free while I still had a job and I was trying it out. But I tell you, writing a book. Now, so that challenge for me was, there was one thing that gave me confidence. So when I used to write emails at work, I would get feedback saying, my God, your emails are good. So I knew, if nothing else, at least my emails were structured. They were structured well for comprehension. They were not bombastic or anything, but they were well structured so people could understand what I was conveying. So I knew I could do that. And in the back of my mind, I already had a framework of how does somebody get unstuck. So I had a framework. I knew I wrote decently well. And then I said, you know what, I can do this. And again, trust yourself, trust your instinct. And I tell you one thing, there's something about my nature. If I put my mind on something, I'll wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and do it. When I got my PMP certification, I did the same thing. I had kids at home. I had a long commute. I woke up at 3 o'clock and I'm prepared. So it's just me. I get very obsessed with something. But so I just practice, 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 practice. And that's what I did with my book. I would not, even though I was advised that you would lose all your creativity in 2 hours, 3 hours, I said, okay, fine, I'll take a break and then I'll write again in the afternoon. And that's just how I pushed myself. And and I had a great publisher slash editor who helped me. And then it came to social media. Let me tell you, as a woman, and women can appreciate this, like I did not want to get in front of the camera without makeup. And I was like lazy about makeup. And I'm like, oh my God, to speak into a camera, I need makeup now. And so that would slow me down. Then I told myself, that's such a dumb barrier I'm creating, right? So I started walking in my neighborhood with my selfie stick and just talking into my camera. It went nowhere. This was not published anywhere, but it was me just saying, get the reps in, get the reps in, get comfortable in front of the camera. And that's what I
Yeah.
did. So in
Well,
every avenue I chase down, whether it's YouTube, LinkedIn, book, everything, nothing came easy, but it all took singular focus to overcome.
that's an amazing journey. I will tell you, the email example really resonates because I think I had the exact opposite experience. My emails over the years were pretty blunt and to the point, and people would meet me and say, "Okay, based on your email, I thought you'd be a really mean guy," or
Oh,
for me, like the interpersonal one-on-one communication or small groups, very natural at that. I do really well with that. You know, but I think what I struggled as a leader with just personally was, how I blend that authentic Matt who's here, chatting, talking, getting to know people versus being on stage and how I find that authentic Bryce. And it was interesting as I moved up into different positions. I think some bad advice saying you act like a VP now. You can't do that. You can't joke
ah,
around that way. And so I kind of retreated more to the serious,
yes,
more to the work oriented, deliberate method of communication. And I think I suffered from it in many ways. Um, I didn't think I felt authentic. I didn't feel like my communication was what really got me to that level. I'm all about relationships and building relationships. And that suffered, I think, because I was trying to put on a different
air,
behavior to
yes,
match the role, right? And
yes.
so it's interesting you talk about how your emails are really well worded. I had to kind of say, maybe I shouldn't write these emails, and definitely not write the angry emails, and go from there. But we all, well, the point of this is that we all can work on our communication. And the idea of you walking around the neighborhood with a selfie stick, sticking and talking to a selfie stick, totally normal these days, right? 15 years ago, someone's probably calling the police and having you talk to a doctor, right? But now that's normal thing. People are
Yes,
all kind of going from there, and that's such a great advice. Even if you just delete it,
yes,
it's like keeping that journal. You write
yes,
that journal for yourself. You don't share that with people, but it helps, right?
it
What
does.
what amazing advice on how to work on communication. What other tips do you have about working on communication for someone right now?
Right. I just want to quickly comment on something you said. When you go up the ladder, people give you advice like you got to act like a leader, right? I'm
Right.
not saying it's completely wrong, but what happens is when you get that aura about you, it's actually very distancing. People stay away from you, and it makes you for social media. It makes you very cold and distant. So that's why I keep saying walk that tightrope because you still want authority, you still want credibility, but so in a way, all the advice we got in the past for social media presence, you almost have to say, I got to remove that. Those are barriers for connection. Sorry, what was your question? What is my
Well,
advice?
just going back to, I think, one of the things that you've been such great advice. So I'm thinking people watching this episode coming into this and saying, what do I work on? Give some tips that people can work on for this communication. Kind of summarize a few
Yes.
examples of what they can work on, both for their own speaking opportunities, but especially through social media and video now.
Right. So if I were them and you're a decent communicator, you do well, relatively well in small talk, I would say, I would say first, if you're waking up and you want something to motivate you, watch a whole lot of videos from great speakers of the past. Look, and then listen to good frameworks in communication. You know why sometimes we give rambling answers? Because we don't have a clear structure in our mind. So we say something, then we go off on a tangent and another tangent and another tangent. And in the end, people look at you like, what are you saying here? So I would say practice good framework. If somebody were to ask you a question, how would you answer this? Anticipate questions in advance is the first thing. So you get better at social communication. So you know, I'm not going to give them 3 points, I'm going to give them 1 point. What would that 1 point be? Like, this is how you train your brain to zone in, right? That's your communication. Now, if you want to become better at social media, pick topics you love, pick topics you are passionate about. Speak about that. Don't go with some pedantic textbook topic. Speak about what you love because the passion will shine through. Do you know your voice, your tone communicates how you feel inside? And I've always told people you don't have to train your voice, just feel good about it. When you feel good about it, your voice sounds better. So do the reps, capture a lot of video. If you want to make it low stakes, post it among your Facebook friends and see. And if it's really people seem to like what you're doing, then go ahead and do it in LinkedIn. Slightly more high stakes from a professional perspective. But do not, the more reps you get, and I don't have to tell you, you're going to do better. It's like for me, when I started speaking, I could see there were a lot of rough edges. The more I did it, I just got better. Every engagement makes me a better speaker. I have a lot of growth left in me, but I know I get better with every stuff. So it's all about reps is my short answer. So.
Well, what amazing advice. And what I would suggest is, people are looking to get in contact with you. Maybe check your webpage out, get your book, connect with LinkedIn. How do they get in contact with you?
Sure, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's easy, at Vidya Raman. My website is vidyaraman.com. So these two avenues are easy. And all my contact information can be found on both those locations, LinkedIn and this. I have a YouTube channel. I sometimes show up on Instagram, not very regular yet. But yeah, there are many ways. But LinkedIn is probably your best bet. Yeah.
I absolutely would suggest following her on LinkedIn. Great tips, wonderful tips. So we're about to wrap up. We're about to get to our favorite part of the day, our espresso round of questions here. So our first question here: best piece of advice you ever got over a cup of coffee?
Oh, the best piece of advice I ever got over coffee is when I was getting ready to write my book, right? Sorry, I need a short answer here. I was all over the map until I was told, what could you talk about for 5 hours with no interruption? And I said, oh, I know my topic. So it should come from your deep passion. That was the best advice. Yeah.
That is great advice, and that's amazing. I can talk about coffee and food for 5 hours, so maybe I'm on the wrong. Uh, Wonderful. Next question. We talked to a lot of leaders on the show. If you were able to sit down with a group of leaders and have a cup of coffee with them, what's a piece of advice you'd give them for coffee?
Oh, yes. I would tell leaders to really, really consider the feelings of people in their teams. They are all kinds of people with different personalities. So I would ask them to adapt their style for every person, acknowledge them because people are hungry for validation. And I find it so sad that so many leaders take what they get from their subordinates for granted. Yes, they get paid for their job, but your validation it's a true win-win. They feel seen and you get rewarded. So, I mean, that's the
Uh,
biggest advice I can give you.
Absolutely. It's such great advice. Connect with your people, talk with them in an authentic way. Um, Work on the communication with your team is probably the number one skill for a leader. And it's so different than being a manager. Manager, you're managing function. Leader, you're trying to lead people, and talking with people, engage with them, enjoying your top team. Should be part of your job. Such great advice there. You can go back and talk to a younger Vidya over a cup of coffee and give her some advice. What advice are you giving her?
Oh, the only advice I can think of is be brave because I wasn't. I had all kinds of doubt. I was not courageous. So now I even have keynotes that talk about courage as a habit. Do it every day because what I didn't realize when I played it safe, I was actually hurting my long term chances because there's something called the cost of inaction. The cost of not doing something is actually hurting you a lot more than you taking a chance now. So, courage, be brave would be what I would have told my younger self. I wasn't, and I lost some time, but it's okay. It's lessons learned now.
What great advice, and I will tell you, you've certainly inspired me, and your journey has really helped me do different things. And so I thank you for that. I'm glad you had that advice. Last espresso round question. You can go back and you can have a cup of coffee with anyone, any place, anytime, anywhere. Who you have my cup of coffee with?
Oh, I would say my father, who's my late father. I tell you, yes, I appreciated him when he was still here, but there's so much I see in me now that I feel it's from him. He would challenge me to aspire for bigger things. I didn't quite understand it. I would like think it's so silly things he would say to me, like, pluck at a gown of gold and you'll get a sleeve of it. And I thought, oh my God, I got to hear this at dinner table conversations. But I tell you, he was instrumental in getting me to dream big. And in many ways, he was a Toastmaster, by the way, in 1956. So now when I do things, I have even my siblings saying, you're doing what did. So in a way, I would love to be dad and tell him how sincerely grateful I am for all that amazing advice I got in my childhood, which I didn't necessarily appreciate at that time, but I do now.
I'm certain he must be very proud and of all you've accomplished. And it's interesting. I often think about this. I've probably gotten all the great advice in my life and not listened to it at that moment and gone back and said I should listen to that. I
Yes,
often think if I went back and talked to my younger self, said, Matt, you should listen to this advice, but even listen to myself. Advice that we get from our parents, sometimes just sinks in years later. And at least I
yes.
keep telling myself that as a dad, that maybe one day, this will sink in. But what a great example, and so much to be proud of your journey. Listen, I want to thank you for this wonderful conversation. Um, Amazing nuggets of communication. I really would encourage everyone out there to follow you on LinkedIn, look at your products. Such a unique message, discussion, and really some really confidence boosters out there for people. Get out there, work on your communication. You can do this. Yeah, thank you so much for joining this episode. I really appreciate it.
Oh, Matt, let me tell you, thank you. I feel honored to be here for such a wonderful conversation. I loved your questions. Thank you. Truly enriching. Thank you, Matthew.
I appreciate that. Till we have the next cup, everyone. Have a great day.